two, three. Take me out to the ball game. Take me out to the crowd. Buy me some peanuts and Cracker Jack. I don't care if I ever get back. Oh, it's root for the Cubbies. If they don't win, it's a shame. For it's 1, 2, 3 strikes, you're out at the old ball game.
This is the
from WBRN Radio, traveling on the Boston Red Network. Our episode, the Monday Morning Quarterback, on the 10th of February, 2020. This is Boston Red in the Jerry Pippin broadcast booth. Very interesting Monday morning quarterbacking will be done here. We'll talk a little about, maybe more than a little, about New Hampshire, the primary. We'll have some numbers here. We have an article, it's an opinion article in the Indianapolis Star. We don't get into Indianapolis very much. This is by somebody named Briggs. Anyway, nonetheless, it's about the candidate, Pete Buttigieg. Is he an elitist? He is an elitist, and he should embrace it. It's the title of the article. We'll also cover Amy Klobuchar, who now is in third place by some tracking polls, I believe the Emerson poll, and what effect this has on Joe Lunchbox Biden. We have at this mic covered extensively Bernie Sanders, Liz Warren, Amy Klobuchar definitely, because she's third on our list of candidates. And what is happening in New Hampshire on the week it was, we talked about New Hampshire and the composition in the state. Roughly 40% of the people in the 2016 New Hampshire primary were what is known as non-aligned or independents. A very large percentage of people, the same way we have in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, a lot of so-called unaligned people, which is a bit tricky to judge where those people will go. But that is some of the political contents. We also have Charlie Cook, the Cook Report. He had an article from him. When we have time, we'll get Amy Walter also in there. She's formerly of ABC, and now she's hanging around NPR, PRX, that's the Public Radio Exchange, and the Cook Report. That's a positive situation there also. Let me just get up to date on a little bit of world news. The coronavirus, as it is now called, it is moving incidentally to a new name. We now have 900 plus deaths. Over 40,000 people are infected with it. And the newest from the World Health Organization is that people are coming down with the virus that have not from Wuhan and have not been to China. And this is a virus, incidentally, unlike SARS and MERS, which is in the same family. But they really don't know how people are contacted. Now, if you start having people that have not interacted with anyone from China, then you've got perhaps secondary infections. Maybe someone infected them that had a contact there. Very, very difficult to say. But in China, in the largest cities, Beijing, Shanghai, etc., people are going back to work after Lunar New Year. Some places they are canceling the workplace for another week, and some on through February. People are wearing masks, which the effectiveness of masks is very difficult to say. I'll have to show people my gloves here and my masks as to how we look. Anyway, the effectiveness of those products is not as good. However, washing of the hands or using wipes which has disappeared from many places. Masks have gone. The just alcohol itself. We advise people in the cold flu season to have isopropyl alcohol around. And have the wipes if you have them. The masks, if you have those also, that's good. But the idea is to get plenty of rest. And for people in my age group, baby boomers, the idea is to get as much rest as possible and take a multivitamin, which is a good preparation, and various other supplements one can take if one decides that. At the Academy Awards, very interesting situation there. I heard an interview with the filmmaker Spike Lee talking about the Academy and the makeup of the Academy and what is going on with it. They were slated to give the Best Picture award to 1917, which is World War I, which was an imperialist war, no doubt about that. The return to Europeanness or whiteness or whatever you want to call it. There were a number of films there. And the exclusion of people of color and the films that are produced by, we'll say, Latinos, Asians, particularly African Americans, in the mix. And the problem here is distribution. You have to get past distribution. That's the same problem we have in internet radio. We go through aggregators, and we're not the aggregator. And nor are we the platform. We are not the Google of the world and various other platforms. Some platforms are more democratic than others. And the way that the numbers are counted is the ballots from the Academy. Now, the Academy has become more diverse over periods of time. Some officials there are people of color, but that takes a long time. The winner, however, is something called Parasite. It's a film out of Korea, and it's in the Korean language. They call it a foreign language film. It's the first time one has won that particular award at being a Best Picture, and perhaps part of the problem was when you become on the fire for diversity, you have to come up with something. So they get a foreign language film, they get an Asian film from Korea. Well, of course, they're speaking Korean there. They're not speaking Chinese. But sort of a bourgeois compromise there. And then, of course, the best actor, best actress, etc. Julie Garland's, the actress involved there, Zimwetter, and Joaquin Phoenix. From the Joker, he's been around a long time, made a passionate speech, and of course Tom Hanks appeared also Best Supporting Actor. He's been around a long time, from Forrest Gump on to Mr. Rogers, if you remember him there. A very good film. We don't watch a lot of films here, but nonetheless we heard something about it, and we'll have more about the Parasite later. I heard a little about it. I heard one, I think it was on NPR or someplace, film critic, one of these film critic operations, talked about Parasite and said it was a good picture and the cinematography, etc., was very good. But they said the same thing about The Birth of a Nation. So, you know, it's kind of where it was. We'll have to hear more about it. But with the streaming services, and Spike talked about that, his latest endeavor was rejected by the studios, but yet he got Netflix and he's streaming right along. But what that does do is you won't see it at the various cinemas. Now, one of the things we predict in the cinema world, that we'll start seeing Netflix films not only being streamed, but you'll start seeing those distributed into some of the cinemas. The cinemas have to get reorganized. At the present time, you have these larger companies, even Magic Johnson and his cinema operation that he has. It's more of a franchise operation. As you start to see, and there are independent cinemas out, incidentally, in small towns, etc., that show films that are not part of a multi-billionaire, billion-dollar syndicate. But there are those, and films can appear there, and independent film types do appear at some. A lot of them have been swallowed up. So one of the things that people should be advocating is more of a sustainable open source type cinema operation, so people that are now being streamed can get into these. One of the big problems, of course, is copyright, so I don't want to get too far off of there. One of the programs we do here at WBRN Radio, Numbers Man, and we use the 1812 Overture, William Tell, or what you want to call it. Anyway, we've been using it for a very long time. And we got a claim by someone. I think we probably got the audio off of YouTube. And that particular 1812 Overture has been in the public domain for many years. So we'll have to get the audio part. And there is an alternative to that. And other creators, the electronic wizard out of Sydney, Mr. Dave Jones, has talked about that, and so has the creator out of Philadelphia. She has a branch has talked about it also. So it's one of those situations where she had an excellent series of the Laserdisc that she redone digitally from NASA moon walks there, and unfortunately YouTube, the BBC, I guess, had a copy on that. BBC usually works under the Creative Commons license. I was very surprised that would happen to Branch there. She'll probably have to put it on Library, which is a different type of a blockchain type operation. Is a little different. We'll be incidentally over at Library there. They don't have the censorship, and those models are different since they're blockchainy. So a little bit different. They didn't want to get too far off the beaten path here in our news roundup, which we always do on all of our shows. Incidentally, we do have the Numbers Man up there. That's our macroeconomics show. It is there, and we covered the week talking about jobs, talking about income inequality, where the blue-collar jobs are, where they're not. We cover all of that, and the trade deficit, and also to big data. There's a new way that they are, new ways, I should say, a plural, that they are now determining various things with the Census Bureau, etc. One of the highlights there, now how they're counting mixed gender couples, which are so-called straights, I guess, and how they are also dealing with LGBT couples, and they are actually counting them. The oldest one, I guess they're not the same age, they are counted, and then of course how they are counting those couples. Anyway, but they are nonetheless being counted under a new categories. So that has changed, and in Switzerland, there's a new law. It was in a referendum, has been adopted overwhelmingly by the people of Switzerland to make discrimination against LGBT people illegal and punishable, which is a step forward. And let me get Ireland here. In Ireland, for the first time, they have two center-right parties there. They've been around for a long time. But now they have a third party, and they've had it, Sinn Féin. Sinn Féin doesn't have as many people, did not have as many people running as the other parties, but they are very close in percentages. Again, we have sort of a situation that happened in Dorgy, Iowa, a freeway split, and that was a two-way split there. Let me get on to little PD there, Buttigieg, and then we'll do a little bit of polling here and go there. Anyway, nonetheless, this is Pete Buttigieg and elitist problem, the Indianapolis Star. I'll read just a little bit of this. The more he tries to prove that he's not an elitist, the more obvious it is to everyone that he is. As the former mayor of South Bend has been unconvincing in distancing himself from his plainly exceptional status, even as it even if it has embraced his rise to legitimate contender for the Democratic nomination for president. He doesn't have to do that. The results of the Iowa caucus still incomplete as of this writing on Wednesday afternoon suggests that Buttigieg is gaining support because of his elitism and not in spite of it. When all the votes are finally counted, Junior Budge will Iowa have won or come close to winning Iowa by generating more enthusiasm than expected amongst all demographics. According to this, he dominated amongst people who consider themselves somewhat liberal and tied to Joe Lunchbox Biden in the race for moderates. According to some polls, Buttigieg won rural farmers. He won Christians. Yeah, he does pretend to be a Christian. And he won people who like to sit in coffee shops and chat about healthcare policy. It's true that Iowa is an imperfect sample of American voters, but people who caucused for Buttigieg were not fooled by who he is. Despite Buttigieg's emphasis on his South Bend roots, his folks, incidentally, are academics. Iowa did not necessarily see him as one of them. They simply saw him as a viable contender for president. As Buttigieg moved on, Iowa presents a solution for his elitist dilemma. Buttigieg has embraced the reality that he is far more accomplished than the average person, and this is a fatal mistake. Comparing a man like Buttigieg, given his background, and he's Maltese, and his family's background, etc., you can't compare apples and oranges. This is a mistake here to begin. Far more accomplished than the average person? Well, yes, he is. He worked much harder. Meaning of the American heartland. Now, the most recent elitism introduced graphic came last week when he tweeted a gap actually in the face of unprecedented challenges. We need a president whose vision was shaped by the American heartland rather by ineffective Washington politics we have come to know and expect. Well, all candidates that are outside of Washington usually talk about this, unless they're like Joe Biden talking about his experience in Washington. That's the only play he has, so to speak. Critics saw his attempt by Buttigieg to weaponize his Midwestern sense of place, a tactic Mike Pence often deploys by extorting the virtues of his inherently real American life experience over the apparently tainted values accrued out on the coast and us east and west. The filmmaker Ava DuVernay spoke for many when she replied respectfully, "Where is the American heartline located exactly in your mind as you write this tweet? Does it include Compton and other places like it? Because us folks from these places would like a president shaped by our vision too." Well, it's not. And what he's talking about when you say the American heartland, that is a little trope, as they like to say these days, to European America. Would frame him as a down-to-earth Midwesterner who is focused on making life better for the typical working-class person ahead of the Iowa caucus. Instead, he signaled unintentionally that he considers the homogeneity of the Midwest to be the purest representation of America in places where people and ideas happen to be far more diverse. Well, that'll do him a lot of good when you get out here. Ben Zimmer, writing in the Atlantic, this is a harmful message. Politicians from both parties have appealed to the heartland, or the homeland. Every campaign cycle, especially since the Iowa caucus took place, took over as the first contest in the primary season. Zimmer further writes, but the sunny rhetoric believes harsh reality. As a negative reaction to Buttigieg's tweet illustrates, talks of the heartland can reinforce a poisonous us versus them mentality. There's no doubt about that. Think about it this way: when Pence pays tribute to the exceptionalism with Midwestern values, which is basically American exceptionalism, this is plausible that he is expressing a sincerely held belief rooted in his conservative evangelical Christian worldview. When Buttigieg makes the same point, though, it comes across as inauthentic, no doubt about that. Buttigieg has pursued education and employment around the world. Presumably he finds value in a diverse perspective, given that the experience when he suggests that there is something fundamentally estimatable about the Midwest existence. He provokes skepticism about it, what he really is getting at. By pandering, Buttigieg is inviting nefarious interpretations of what kind of leader he will be. Well, he'll be there. Anyway, they go on to say he's 38 years old just last month, so I guess he was 37, had achieved more than most people do in a lifetime. He graduated from Harvard in 2004, graduated from Oxford University as a Rhodes Scholar in 2007. That's a political appointment, incidentally. Worked as a Toronto-based consultant for a McKinsey & Company. Spent 8 years as a mayor of South Bend. And he speaks 8 languages. Well, yeah, he is that. Buttigieg communication advisor Liz Smith in December said rival candidates Bernie Sanders and Liz Warren reflect the height of elitism because they support policies that would make college free for everyone. Making college free for everyone is anti-elite, as we like to say around Harvard Square, etc. in Boston. We're not elitists. Anyway, position is that an emphasis on a free college ignores the majority of people in his hometown who pursue either no or different kinds of education. Was he talking about manual training there? In other words, one of the best educated political candidates in America has positioned himself as a hero of trade schools. Well, don't call them trade schools anymore. They're a little bit more than that. Nowadays, they are called some college. If you are cringing at my use of the word hate, I assure you this is appropriate. Buttigieg's biography and moderate approach to policy and politics have enraged the most left-leaning Democrats, particularly young people who identify as socialists. The type of derangement syndrome that normally spreads once a person actually becomes president is already affecting people who detest Buttigieg. Well, they will detest him. Some will not. We did a show on the eggheads, I believe, one time there. But he's trying to position himself not as necessarily an egghead, an intellectual. He's positioning himself as a man next door off to the trade schools. See, Megan Day, a writer for the far left. I'm not sure how far left Jacobin is, and deleted, said his 2014. Incidentally, he volunteered for a naval intelligence officer to Afghanistan, where he quite literally could have died or was a photo op. Well, very few intelligence officers in Afghanistan die. I don't know what the percentage of them is. Well, possibility could also die walking across the street in South Bend. Young educated liberals look at Buttigieg and see his nauseating character, not of the person they are and even the person they want to be, but of a person they felt pressured to emulate but never quite became. The outcome they regard with tortured ambivalence. Buttigieg is a guy they hated in college, not only because he was obnoxiously successful, but because his success set uncomfortably and hauntingly close to a version of success they once felt prompted to achieve. And there are a lot of people out there that would look at success by Buttigieg because of his degrees, not actually understanding what he did or what he did not do, period. And as a young professional with an elite pedigree, no doubt about that. If you go to Harvard, Amy Klobuchar went to Yale and then to the University of Chicago. Are you going to call her an elitist? Her father was a journalist. Her mother was a school teacher. They were both union members. We don't know if little Petey was ever in a union. Doubtful very seriously. So this is one of the things, but it does come from the Indianapolis Star, a Metro columnist, James Braggs. Anyway, the emphasis on validation is revealing. Buttigieg is encouraging people to keep believing in themselves. So did the pastor in Harlem, Adam Clayton Powell, keep the faith. But also in the very institutions that make up America. This in itself is a little bit different. Let's look at some polling here quickly, and we'll run on here. This is from Real Clear Politics, some of the latest polls out here. And we have the Emerson tracking poll here, and I'm not sure what else we got going here. We'll look at the Suffolk poll. These are two polls we have. Out of the Boston Globe's poll has Bernie up. Oops, sorry about that. That was Saturday's poll. Let's get to Sunday's poll. Again, this is the race has tightened up according to the Globe Suffolk University poll. Bernie's ahead by 2, 24 to 22 of Buttigieg. Biden has 10. Liz Warren at 13. Amy Klobuchar at 9 in this poll. In the WHDH, this is Emerson poll. They have Bernie Sanders up by 10, 20 to 30, 11 for Biden, and 12 for Warren, and 13 for Amy Klobuchar. So Amy Klobuchar is in third place in this particular poll. And so you can see how these polls are going up and down here. On Saturday, we have one for CNN University of New Hampshire poll. Had Bernie up by 7, 28 to 21 over Little Petey. And Joe Lunchbox Biden at 11, Warren at 9, and Amy Klobuchar down at 5. We go to the Suffolk poll. That was on Saturday. Buttigieg by 1, and we reported this out there. And we go to Emerson poll. He was up by 7, 31 to 24. Biden at 11, Warren at 11, and Amy Klobuchar. By all accounts, Amy Klobuchar has come up. Let's get to this poll here. This is a tracking poll. Debate shifts momentum for candidates, but Sanders' style stays in a positive position. This is the Emerson College tracking poll. Bernie Sanders has 30, followed by Mia Petey at 20, Amy Klobuchar at 13, Liz Warren at 12, and Joe Biden at 11. They are all pretty much tied up together. Margin of error 4.3 in this poll. This is the Emerson poll here. Since yesterday, Sanders has lost 1 point. Buttigieg had lost 4 points. And Amy Klobuchar has gained 4 points. This is something we're really watching here, is where she's moving up. Warren has gained 1. Biden has held his support there. Professor Kimball, director of polling, explains the challenge. Both Sanders and Mayor Petey received a bounce in our polls since Iowa, but it looks like debate on Friday may have a stymied momentum for the front runners. The candidate who seems to be able to take advantage of it is here comes Amy Klobuchar, 4 points up. And you have to watch a candidate in the closing days, because a candidate like Klobuchar that starts gaining support in the next poll, she could end up in third or even second place. Who knows? The respondents were asked if they would definitely vote for their preferred candidate or if they could change their mind. 66% said they'd definitely vote, and 36% they could still change their mind. Sanders supporters were more committed, 88% there, and he needs that. The other top candidates, 64% of Warren, 62% of Biden's, and 56% of Klobuchar's, and 54% of Buttigieg. Continuing the trend found in past Emerson College polls, Bernie pulls very strong support from younger voters. Amongst voters under 50 years age, he leads 44% of support, followed by only 17 for Little Petey, 13 for Warren. Amongst voters 50 and over, Buttigieg leads those. Very interesting, because he's the youngest person in the race. An 8-point drop from yesterday. Now, this is what we really look at, followed by Sanders and Amy at 19 and Biden at 16 and 11. Biden is also coming up. Sanders holds very liberal voters. Following Sanders among those very liberal voters is Warren at 24. So she's still in the business, and she would be in it, coming from next door. Klobuchar at 12 and Warren at 11. Sanders also leads with 37% of somewhat liberal of voters. There, following him amongst those votes is Amy Klobuchar at 17. And then you have Biden and Sanders among moderate and conservative voters. Buttigieg has got those at 26%, following him is Amy Klobuchar. She's coming on. She's at 17. We only expect her to rise, and then the one that was, quote-unquote, the go-to candidate, Joe Lunchbox Biden at 15 and Bernie at 14. For the 1st Congressional District, 37 to support Bernie, followed by 14 for Buttigieg, and Amy Klobuchar again right behind him at 13, statistically tied. We have Biden and Warren with 11. The 2nd District, 26% of voters support Buttigieg, and the drop there is 14 for Bernie, and 12 for Amy, and 11 for, 14 support Amy. Again, she's in 3rd place. 12 for Warren. Voters again asked to pick a candidate regardless of who they were going to vote for. They expect to be Democratic nominees. Sanders led this question with 44%, followed by Little Petey and Joe Biden at 16. Bloomberg comes in. He's not there, but at 8, and with all his money, and here comes Amy Klobuchar. So she's the surprise of the day. There's no doubt about that. Questions for the day's voters were asked how important they think experience in Washington for presidential candidates. 74% they said somewhat, and very important with 13 were neutral, and 13 so forth and so on there. So that is that particular poll. Let's look at one other poll while we're looking at polls here. This is the University of New Hampshire's poll by Dr. Smith, Andrew Smith. Bernie holds a slim lead over Mayor Petey, or former Mayor Petey, what do you want to call him. Support for the pair has increased considerably since July. Former VP Biden and Elizabeth Warren, who trails the pair, have lost significant ground. The majority of Democratic primary voters expect Sanders to win the primary. So that's how that sets up. The margin of error in this sampling area here is 3.7, and negative are there, so we'll look at that. And on top here is in this poll, this is taken the 4th to the 7th of February 2020. Bernie at 28, Mayor Petey at 21, and then comes Joe Biden and Elizabeth Warren at 9. Amy Klobuchar had 5 in this poll, a little different from the other polls that we have seen. So sometimes we have different things here. Let me just conclude up here with what is going on here to reiterate that, and then we'll move on quickly here. So there are all kinds of things out there in this, and we expect other polls. Incidentally, we'll have some special programming here on New Hampshire primary. We still have in the box, so to speak, the mess called Iowa, and our open source report, we'll get that up later here. We got it finished, we just got to get it broadcast, talking about open source software in elections, and we'll talk about the Shadow Software Company, the dodgy operation there. So I think we pretty much covered Sunday and Saturday polling. Usually that is a little bit suspect, but we'll do that. And the only other poll we did was Friday. It was the NBC News Marxist poll. Had Bernie ahead by 4, and then Buttigieg, and then Joe Biden, and Warren and Joe Biden, and then Amy Klobuchar was in 3rd place there. And we don't really have much on approval ratings here. A little bit older polls. We won't go into those. Let me take a station break, and we'll bring in the mix. I won't do American Dirt today. That's a novel there. We will bring in Jane Fonda. She's been talking about climate change, protests to Los Angeles. She was protesting in Washington. Has a scheduling problem, a collision of two important parts of a very busy life. Oscar-winning actress has moved from Century City to Washington, D.C. in September, intent on a mission to raise awareness of climate change. She protested the U.S. Capitol in a bright red coat purchased on sale at Neiman Marcus. Very interesting there. And Fonda will kick off a series of monthly Golden State protests on the Capitol, on the steps, of Los Angeles City Hall with celebrities Norman Lear and Rita Moreno, who used to a partner of Mr. Garner. Anyway, future events are planned for Wilmington, Bakersfield, remember Bakersfield there. And anyway, California is strategic. She told a group, told members of the Wing, a women co-working space, lots of oil extraction, lots of fossil fuel consumption, a reputation as a national environmental leader. And she wants the governor in California to put an end to oil exploration. Anyway, Fonda has spent most of her life juggling two full-time careers as an actor with dozens of music, documentaries, TV shows under her very small belt, and actor supporting women's rights, the United Farm Workers, the Black Panther Party, etc. She had been out there, along with the late Tom Hayden, who she was once married to, there. And so this is out in the L.A. Times, incidentally. Fonda, biggest regrets, Fonda has said repeatedly through the years that she was posing on an anti-aircraft gun during a tour of North Vietnam. She was nicknamed Hanoi Jane. Well, we were very proud of her at that moment. We think that was one of her finest hours. Anyway, it's different people think different things on different issues. So Jane Fonda, a picture of Jane Fonda in red standing outside of the White House, vote, speak, and act. I think Jane is is close to 80. She may be in the 80s now. Anyway, let me roll along here, and I think we'll take a break and we'll go to Charlie Cook. Let me get Orson Bean in here while we're here. Free-spirited actor, stage and screen. This is Mr. Orson Bean. He died at 91, stage, TV, film comedian. He was blacklisted as a suspected communist, founded a progressive school, moved to Australia before returning to the U.S. This is from the New York Times. Incidentally, Orson Bean, a free-spirited TV, stage, and film comedian who stepped out of his storybook life to found a progressive school, moved to Australia, gave away his possessions, and wandered around a turbulent America in the 70s as a late blooming hippie. Died in Venice, California. He was 90. He was evidently hit by two cars. His death was confirmed by the L.A. Coroner's Office, said it as an accident. It was struck and killed by a car on Friday night while crossing a street. Anyway, early in his career, in the 50s and 60s, being a stable comic who looked like a naive farm boy, was ubiquitous on TV, popping up on all the networks, ad-libbing game show panelists. To tell the truth, I remember when he was there, he was a guest on Jack Pye and Johnny Carson. The Tonight Show is a regular in the Playhouse dramas that ended in 1954. Host of his own variety show, The Blue Angels. I don't remember that one, but anyway, he starred on Broadway, off-Broadway, made films. Founded the Society of Laurel and Hardy Officio, amassed a fortune, and was blacklisted briefly as a suspected communist. In 1964, captivated by progressive education theory, created a small school in Manhattan, 15th Street School, that made classes and most rules optional, letting children run, scream, and pretty much do as they please. For the remainder of the decade, he devoted himself to the school, paying his bills and covering his deficits, and working harder and harder. He often performed in 5 TV panel shows a week, squeezing in Nightclubs Act, a Broadway musical, married a second time, added more children to his growing family, but he felt overwhelmed by the trappings of success and by the turmoil, nation caught up in conflict over the Vietnam civil rights movement. There's assassinations there. We were having babies and money was rolling in so fast that we had to push it out. He recalled in the interview with the Times several years later. We had a 4-story townhouse, lived in Maine. We loved it, but I was feeling freaking out, believing America's generals were planning an immediate coup d'etat. Beam abandoned his thriving career and moved his family to Australia in 1970, became a disciple of the Australian psychotherapist Wilhelm Reich, and wrote a book about his psychosexist theories of me and the orgy. When the book appeared in 1971, Beam returned to America with his wife, 4 children. For years led a nomadic life as an aging hippie and house husband, casting off material possessions in a quest for self-realization. We were sure we did not want to be possessed by things, so intent of having them that we gave almost everything away we own. He wrote, that was 1977. We entered what I called out later a hippie stage. We tossed our children into a van, and bummed around the country, sponging on friends and putting our children in school where we happened to like. In his dropout years, he recalls in a memoir, his experience with psychedelics, drugs, communal sex, and other kinds of things there. He collected dripwood books and at night read aloud to one another. Anyway, okay. He scratched out a living by making commercials and animated film voiceovers. In 1980, he was bored with inactivity. He moved back into the public space. He reappeared in TVs, movies, soap operas, you name it. Over the next 3 decades, he took recurring roles in The Murder, She Wrote, Normal, Ohio, Desperate Housewives, being John Malkovich. While he evidently performed in some 50 TV series, 30 films, he's often remembered for his early panel shows. We were much more intelligent then. That's from Katie Carlson Hurt, a freaking panelist with her. I remember her. In 1999, he was born Dallas Frederick Burroughs in Burlington, Vermont. Anyway, his father founded the American Civil Liberties Union, was a Harvard campus police officer. His mother, a cousin of Calvin Coolidge, killed herself when Beam was a teenager. He graduated from Cambridge Ridge Latin School in 1946, was drafted in the Post Army and served with occupation forces in Japan, a veteran. He was an accomplished musician. After being discharged, changed his name to Orson Beam. Worked in clubs in Boston. He was blacklisted for attending 2 Communist Party meetings, but it was overblown and hardly slowed his career. Nightclub work in Baltimore, Philadelphia, and landed him in New York at the Blue Angel and the Village Vanguard, and where the Pentagon included Lenny Bruce, Mort Saul, remember those, Woody Allen. Fame followed him onto the Ed Sullivan Show, Steve Allen. Merv Griffin used to be out of Philadelphia, remember him, Jack Parr. Carson, he appeared on Playhouse 90, Studio One, and what was the comedy he did? Success, Spoil Rock Hunter. Okay. He married an actress, Jacqueline DeSayu, in 1956. They had a daughter, divorced in 1962. His second wife, Carol Maxwell, married in 1965, had 3 kids, and so forth and so on. He married another actress, Allie Mills, in 1993, and lived for many years in Venice. Oh no, I didn't know that. His son-in-law was Andrew, Breitbart, the conservative journalist who fortunately died in 2011. He's survived by his wife and sons and etc. Taken with unorthodox ideas of A.S. Mills, Sunderland Hills School in England. Beam, who never got beyond high school, bought a building in Chelsea in 1964, hired 4 teachers, and opened the 15th Street School with 40 pupils. That was in New York. He also founded Son of the Desert, an international fraternity organization devoted to films and the lives of Laurel and Hardy. Anyway, Beam wrote his memo, Too Much Is Not Enough, that's 1988, and a humorous book, 25 Ways to Cook a Mouse for a Gourmet Cat, and included corn, mouse, and cabbage, and burrito Conretto. Anyway, this is Orson Beam. May he rest actually in peace. Let me take a break here, and then we'll go Mr. Cook. WBRN Radio. We'll get this break in here. Okay, we'll talk a little bit about Amy Klobuchar. This is from her hometown newspaper, the Minneapolis Tribune. This is by Durham, New Hampshire. Senator Klobuchar's future as a candidate for president now depends on a robust showing in the New Hampshire primary, and the Minnesota Democrat is dashing around the state this weekend as she fights to stay in the race. Well, she has already said she's going on to Nevada. I think more than any other candidate, I need your vote. That's what Amy Klobuchar told a rally in Durham on the University of New Hampshire's campus. About 450 people turned out there. It was Amy's first of 9 Granite State rallies scheduled the next 3 days after her fifth place finish in Iowa. She's once again trying to crack into the top of 4 seats, and evidently some polls show she's well on her way. And I don't know what Liz Warren has to say about that one. We'll see. Anyway, 2 senators from neighboring, and of course we know about them. Former Vice President's weak showing in Iowa precipitated a new round of concerns about his durability in the race. Well, he'll be durable. That's Joe Lunchbox Biden. It's good for Senator Klobuchar if things continue to stay somewhat murky at the top of the field. That's from Doug Farnell. He's a D.C.-based strategist who is not backing a candidate. Of course, that depends on how Klobuchar's campaign has husbanded their resources and how well they have planned and budgeted past that. Well, they collected $2 million from the debate, so they'll have enough to make it on to Nevada. The campaign shifted a big part of its Iowa team, no doubt. They don't need it in Iowa anymore. To Nevada, and it holds caucuses on the 22nd. Handful of paid workers on the ground in South Carolina. She's not getting much out of South Carolina. Stay the hell out of there. She's campaigned some for the Super Tuesday states as organizers at her Minneapolis headquarters assigned to those states. She lacks, of course, a national organization and several leading candidates, including Mr. Bloomberg. He says he can envision a New Hampshire scenario that would give Klobuchar a healthy boost. Warren could finish poorly and end her campaign, leaving Klobuchar the leading female candidate. Buttigieg could do worse than expected, blunting his momentum and giving Klobuchar another shot at the Midwest moderate line. Hopefully she doesn't take it exactly the same as Buttigieg. Run around here talking about trade schools. Anyway, carried many of the Iowa counties that had been a focus for Klobuchar. He is one of the biggest problems she has there. Many around the state that supported both Barack Obama and DJ Trump in consecutive presidential election. The field needs to be wind now, and I still think she's second tier. This is from somebody named Jerome DeBold, a former Manchester alderman, longtime party activist who's endorsed. Oh, I see, Buttigieg. Well, we get where he's coming from. But she's on old Petey's deal there. I woke up this morning ready to go. She said that was in Durham. We are going to barnstorm your state. She reminded the crowd that the impeachment trial kept her out of Iowa in a closing minute. Yeah, if she'd have got into Iowa, she'd have done much better, but she did get the endorsement of the union leader in Manchester. That helped her out a lot because, quite frankly, she's not known very well in New Hampshire. That is one of the problems when you go in there, and she didn't get the advance, and that is Amy. Smiling there as usual. And Joe Lunchbox Biden reminds people Buttigieg is not Barack. Get off of that. It'll be interesting to see how he does in this situation, period. And to Uncle Charlie is which one we come to first, I suppose. So now what? We'll get Amy Walter. Although controversy continues to swirl around Iowa caucuses, folk here in New Hampshire seem to have already moved on. We don't need an official recanvass or final party certified winner to tell us what happened on Monday night, so forth and so on. Joe Biden, according to Amy Walter, was a big loser. Now Elizabeth Warren and Amy Klobuchar have been relegated to the back burner. Well, I kind of doubt that a little bit. Amy will dispute that. New Hampshire is an ideal environment for both Buttigieg and Little Petey. Sanders, the anti-establishment, blue-collar libertarian constituency, is well represented in the Live Free or Die state. Meanwhile, the suburban appeal of Little Petey, which he displayed in Iowa by winning suburban enclaves around Des Moines, is well suited for the populous and prosperous southern part of the state. That's essentially better than the extra burbs of Boston. It's also clear that Little Petey's success in Iowa has gotten him a second look here. And he was in an American Legion Hall in Merrimack. Was a capacity. Buttigieg organizers had to shoo away those of us shivering in the gloomy wet weather who were waiting to get in. Buttigieg, however, is unlikely to win this moderate or non-Bernie lane without a fight. No doubt. And Biden said, I have great respect for Mayor Petey there. And it's interesting. There are plenty of candidates who won their party nominations despite struggles. Willard Romney, John Kerry, Al Gore, and of course all three of these went on to lose in the Electoral College. It came short. But those candidates who have an advantage in their primaries that Biden doesn't. Money. On Tuesday, Sanders announced that his campaign had hauled in $25 million in January, $2 million more than what Biden has raised in the entire fourth quarter. That's 2019. The stronger Buttigieg looks in New Hampshire, the better things look for Sanders. After all, the other big challenge for Buttigieg to prove that he can appeal to more than just European voters. Wants to move on to Nevada and, of course, to South Carolina, where the followers of O.J. Simpson will be waiting in great numbers. So this is some polling here. Sanders at 18-17% was... this is out in Nevada. The scenario sets up well for another candidate, not on the ballot. She's talking about Bloomberg. Be able to unite the anti-Sanders constituency. While I wait in line on success with Buttigieg event, I chatted up voters in line. One man there said he was there to give the South Bend mayor a look. He said he was trying to find a moderate attorney to Sanders and was choosing between Mayor Petey and Amy Klobuchar. Amy Klobuchar starting to win the ballot here. Bloomberg, another woman we met in Manchester, told us that she liked Buttigieg but also liked Bloomberg. And in these states on when we go into the Super Tuesday, Bloomberg will destroy Mayor Petey. May be the preferred candidate of suburban elite, but he can win over skeptical African Americans. Well, he's buying them off. He's got London Breeze out in San Francisco. He's got the former mayor of Philadelphia, Mayor Nutty. I call him a Nutter, or what the hell his name is. And he's got the mayor of Washington, D.C., whatever her name is, and several other mayor types. He's been buying them off with a ton of money. Can he convince older blue-collar voters who have a history with Biden that he is an acceptable alternative? I doubt that very seriously. So when will we know who's going to win the nomination? Here's my advice. Accept this as the most unpredictable, unconventional primary campaign that we've seen in years, if nothing necessary in memory. Well, we've seen a lot of them there. We started walking Iowa in the 70s with George McGovern. So again, we've been out there a long time. Here's Charlie Cook. I guess I'll get Charlie in, at least some of him. Little solace for Democrats in new polls. Democrats have now officially kicked off the voting race to face DJ Trump, yet they've spent the rest of this week unpacking the results in Iowa. A flood of national polls demonstrated any Democrat who thought the impeachment could make Trump easy to beat should be no doubt disappointed. His approval ratings are up. The latest national survey, the NBC, Wall Street Journal, released this weekend. His approval rating at 46, well within historic range for the poll, 38 to 47. His disapproval at 15, the most recent Fox News poll, pegged his rating at 45. Well, actually did better than that in the Gallup poll, the Cadillac of all polls there. Anyway, his disapproval at 54. The ABC News, Washington Post at 44. Yeah, that's not even out there anymore. Anyway, let's continue with Charlie here. Impeachment pretty clearly has not hurt him, no doubt about that. His voters who dislike Trump are pretty much the same ones who disliked him for the earlier weeks in office. Now the impeachment stage is drawn to a close. Will Democrats now focus their attention on actually trying to defeat him, or will they find themselves something else to distract them? That raises an interesting question. What's the first president in history of polling never to have a majority approval rating in his performance in a major national poll win re-election? There are two elected incumbents who lost re-election over the past 75 years. That's Jimmy Carter of Georgia and George H.W. Bush. Had job approval ratings that dipped lower than Trump's are today. They also ascended higher than Trump for the long stretch of time. Having taken a relatively cheap shot at Democrats and other Trump critics on the benefits of impeachment, let's go for one aim at Trump. Since early in his administration, I wondered if Trump was trying his best to lose re-election and what would have been done differently than he had. A president who loses a popular vote by 2% and almost by 3 million votes normally would be trying to win over other people, not necessarily at all, but most recently I've come to suspect that's his method to this madness. He's taken a page from Karl Rove, and that's the plan for G.W. Bush in 2004 after he stole the 2000 election. When he was seeking re-election, had a formidable challenge of winning over swing voters. That campaign focused primarily, though not certainly not exclusively, on trying to grow the base. It looked for people who looked, sound, and act, though voted like people who voted for Bush in 2000, but were not registered to vote, or were registered but didn't vote 4 years earlier. It's clear now that this is exactly the strategy Trump's campaign is pursuing. It is a necessity. Now, yes, there were people that didn't vote. A similar situation. He's trying to find them, including felonies. And when we say he, we're talking about DJ Trump. So, yes, that does work, Charlie. You have your base behind you, and you need a few more points. You find people that agree with you. And this is the reason in our Ouija board model we don't include conspiracy theories, climate doubters, vaccination doubters, and other nutcases. And Trump runs a little bit ahead because this is about 1 percentage points, and sometimes 1.5 percentage points. We automatically concede to DJ Trump. Now, this tells you right there that that grouping of people could be used. In other words, he's enlarging the circumference that perhaps were not in the election in 2016. But there's a little bit of fallacy there also, because 2016 did bring people in that were not in the circumference in 2012. So that has been stretched. Now, what Bush did in 2000, Al Gore had a very large turnout and Florida was a doom there. They stole the election there. But by bringing new people in who are not registered, what can you bring in there? Well, voter registration has worked for the Democrats. It could work there, but also at the same time, and depending obviously on the candidates like Bernie Sanders would be able to bring in people that are not registered also. So that is a different situation. So the big argument the Democrats would have would be, can a candidate like Bernie Sanders excite the base much more than they were excited in Iowa? That is possible. Could Bloomberg buy the base? That is possible also. And it would be well organized. It would not be something dodgy like Iowa. Nonetheless, on the 10th of February, 2020, Boston Red in the Jerry Pippin broadcast booth here, and we'll see you soon. Good day.